Hello, everyone. It is Andrew Wall here with Business Development Month, care of Intuit and QuickBooks. We're going to be talking a little bit about SWOT analysis. Now, how is everyone hearing my audio? I just want to make sure it's good. We've switched back and forth a couple times I'm on a phone now with my AirPods. I was trying the computer audio. I think it's good on my end, but if those of you want to share on the chat panel whether the audio is good on your end, it would be greatly appreciated. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself for those of you who have no idea who I am. My name is Andrew Wall. I am the founder of an organization called Wall CPA Chartered Professional Accountants. It's a born in cloud accounting business. I am on social media and do encourage everybody to connect and keep this conversation going after this webinar, so you can connect with me on Twitter at WallCPA. I'm also on Instagram at WallCPA as well. And of course, it's great to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And you can find me on LinkedIn by searching Andrew Wall or as under the small business accountant, which I was lucky to grab early on. So a little bit about my backstory. You can see this picture here in the background is a picture of me at QuickBooks Connect in San Jose back in 2015, which I think was my very first QuickBooks Connect. And this was early in the days of my cloud accounting journey. Shortly before this, I had left my father's accounting practice, which was a 30-year-old established accounting firm. And I left primarily because my father and I were sort of butting heads on the direction. I'd connected with some industry thought leaders that I thought were doing amazing things in what was going on in the cloud. And I wanted to be part of that journey. And my dad wasn't quite ready at that point in time to move along that journey. And as a result, him and I were butting heads as fathers and sons can do like no others. And so I'm proud to announce that things have come full circle. I am now coming back to take over my father's accounting firm. So in addition to Wall CPA, I'm also the founder of CPA for IT, which is a niche-focused accounting firm. Again, cloud-focused, but bringing on my father's accounting practice and his traditional accounting practice and bringing it along the fold to the journey. So that's a little bit about my background. One of the things that we do within our firm is we do provide business coaching for our clients. We call it our pyramid of power, which looks at where they are now, where they want to go, and how they're going to get there. The purpose of today's session is to talk a little bit about where people are now, specifically the SWOT analysis. Now, I told you a little bit about myself, and to make things a little bit fair, I'd like you guys to share a little bit about yourselves. So I'd like to get a bit of a better understanding to know who I'm speaking with, because I do my best to try and engage with my audience and communicate. And unfortunately, in these webinars where I have everyone muted, it's often hard to create that level of engagement. So I'm going to do my best to try and do that through the use of polls. So we've got a high percentage of people are coming in as bookkeepers, which is great to see. I love to see, the bookkeepers stepping into some of these areas that have historically been dominated by the accountants. We've got a even mix between small businesses and accountants. And I think SWOT analysis is really an excellent tool for bookkeepers, not only for their own internal businesses, but also for their clients. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when I tell you what SWOT analysis is. So I think I'm going to close the poll right now and share with you guys the results. We got a lot more small businesses joining on. Maybe I got to give it another second. We're up to 20. Well, we were up to 25%. So still got some people completing polls. But I'm going to close the poll right now to share with you guys. We are more than half of the attendees are bookkeepers, and let me just share that. Okay, so as you can see, we've got 21% small business owners, 57% bookkeepers, and 21% accountants. I will do my best to balance this content to give value to the three groups that we're dealing with. Of course, the reality is there are slightly different needs between the small business owner, bookkeeper, and accountant. So let me share with you what our agenda is. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what a SWOT analysis is. Now, SWOT, as many of you know, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, of course, I'm going to dive into those individual areas. But I'm going to end by how we actually turn your SWOT analysis into actionable business strategy. And in fact, I'm even going to go through a very simple and basic SWOT analysis that we did on our own company and show you how we turn that into actionable strategy. And then, of course, we'll close with some Q&A and a call to action to join us for our next webinar, which is going to be hosted by Bob Wang, who I've had the privilege of sitting on a number of panels with him. If you haven't had a chance to listen to him speak, I really encourage you to register for that upcoming webinar. So, what is SWOT? So SWOT is, as we said before, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It is one form of situational analysis. It is a snapshot in time. It can also be used to look at the organization as a whole, or it can be used to look at specific areas within the organization. Or even, as I said earlier, it can be used to help analyze your individual clients if you are a bookkeeper or an accountant. I think the most important thing to know and understand about a SWOT analysis is this differentiation between internal analysis and external analysis. And even in going through the process with our own team, people often get confused between, what's a threat and what's a weakness, or what's a strength and what's an opportunity. And how you differentiate between those two is really internal versus external. So strengths and weaknesses are internal analysis, meaning these are the things that you have control over. Whereas opportunities and threats are external factors, things that you may be able to influence, but ultimately you don't have control over them. And so one of the most important things when you're going through your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is to do your best to really step back and say, well, is this truly a strength? Is it internal? Is it within my control? Or is it an opportunity? And more often than not, the confusion is the other way around. You're taking strengths and listing it under opportunities, or taking a weakness and listing that under threats. So really take a harsh and fine line between what is internal and what is external. So now we're going to talk a little bit about strengths. So strengths are the internal positive attributes of your business. And the strength section allows the company to consider its competitive advantages in the marketplace. And these advantages are typically the focal point of the company's operation and strategic planning, but they also coincide with the way the company markets. For example, companies that have strengths related to manufacturing and production will often promote themselves as high quality brands. Whereas companies that are more efficient in distribution and good pricing or good bargaining power with suppliers will list their strengths around how they can provide low cost and less about premium services and more about cost, which I'm not a huge fan of, but some people take that venue. So now strengths can be sort of subdivided into 4 categories. So we've got marketing, human resources, assets, and financial resources. You'll actually see when we talk about weaknesses, again, we're going to subdivide into these same 4 categories. And sort of the one thing I thought was the best thing that I could do would be to help you guys drive into what are your strengths in marketing and human resources and assets and financial resources by providing you with a list of questions that you can use to drive in and get feedback from your staff and from your customers. Because one of the other things you have to be careful of when you're doing analysis of your strengths and your weaknesses is that this is not your perception, but what is reality. And oftentimes we can be biased about our own strengths or our own weaknesses. And so getting feedback and including other people in the SWOT analysis is really important. And again, one of the great things about a SWOT analysis is it's a great brainstorming activity. So making sure that you're not doing this in isolation, bringing in other resources. But some of the questions that you might want to ask when it comes to marketing are things like, what's the company's competitive advantages? What are their unique selling propositions? Do they have any exclusive relationships with suppliers or distributors? And how extensive is their distribution network? And what strengths what strengths do the marketing and sales team have? And are they a well-known brand? And again, this is just in the one area of the marketing section. Again, we're going to break into human resources, which is another area that's important to explore when you're looking at your strengths. And you might want to ask questions around whether your employees have skills or expertise that your competitors don't have, or whether your employees have professional accreditations or certifications that give you a unique advantage. Again, one of the things I think is really unique about Bob Wang, who's going to be speaking later, is he's actually a CPA who's doing bookkeeping exclusively, which I think is again, a sort of unique thing. Switching over to sort of assets now, you might want to look at whether you have proprietary technology or intellectual property that would be, valuable to your marketplace, or whether if you're not in the service-based business, do you have equipment or machinery that your other competitors don't have? You might even want to look at your building location as whether that's a competitive advantage, or in the cloud environment, your lack of a building location might also be either a competitive advantage or even like a weakness, as we'll talk about earlier. We're going to be looking at similar areas. Finally, financial resources. You really want to look at how well capitalized is the business and whether it has easy access to capital if it needs it. And obviously, as accountants, we're going to look at profit margins and other financial indicators to see how we compare favorably to industry benchmarks. And I think one of the other things to note about a SWOT analysis that is a great value of this is that you don't have to do it just on yourself. You can do a SWOT analysis on your competitors. There is a great spreadsheet if you're using Office 365. If you just search for spreadsheet templates called SWOT analysis. And the way that they do their SWOT analysis is actually you do yours and then you do 3 competitors, which I think is a really interesting approach for those who want to do a sort of competitive breakdown. Now I'm gonna load up another poll here and find out from you guys what areas your business, in what areas you have the greatest strength. So let's launch that and see what areas that most of the people on this call think that they have the greatest strength, whether that's in the marketing area, human resources, assets, or financial resources. And we've got, right now we're splitting between a slightly heavier load to human resources than financial resources. So this is interesting. We've got virtually no one saying, well, we have no one saying that assets are the strength. And marketing is a low end. I'm not really surprised to see marketing on the low end within the accounting and bookkeeping professionals. Unfortunately, that is an area that a lot of people could seek some opportunity. Even myself, I mean, we're pretty large on social media, but you'll see when we go through our own SWOT analysis that marketing is still an area for opportunity for us. But interesting, no one is saying that assets are their greatest strength. And that's interesting because and we're going to talk about sort of one of my weaknesses later on, but I see high overhead as a weakness for me, and I bet you some of you are 100% virtual and probably are not recognizing that as a key strength. But I'm going to close this poll and share those results with everyone. We do have about 63%, or exactly 63%, saying that their strengths are in human resources, and then followed up by financial resources. Lastly, by marketing, and no one with assets. So obviously people are a really important asset and a great strength. So I'm not totally surprised to see that number one. Not totally surprised to see marketing as low as it is, but a little bit shocked that no one considers their assets to be one of their greatest strengths. So let's move on. We'll close out our description on strengths with a little quote here, which I love, which is, "Don't die by your weaknesses, live through your strengths." Because it's important to know and understand that we build upon our strengths. And as I said earlier, you really have to have a solid understanding of what these strengths are. So don't just trust your gut. Really reach out and talk with your employees, your customers, even the people you might have historically considered your competitors, because I think we live in an era right now where people are willing to share and cooperate with other accountants and bookkeepers. And I often hear from all the people at the networking events that I do, Get Connected, Connect, all these great meetups and events held by Intuit, where my true strengths and potentially weaknesses lie. So with that said, let's jump over to an area no one wants to talk about, which is their weaknesses. So these are, as we said earlier, the internal negative attributes of your business. So really focusing on making sure that these are the internal areas, the areas that you have control over. And it might seem counterintuitive that a company would see advantages in assessing its weaknesses, but it's important to understand that understanding them makes it easier to deal with. And generally, companies companies would have one or two approaches to how they deal with weaknesses. They can either seek to improve them if those weaknesses restrict the company from actually implementing strategies, or they can just realize that these weaknesses are simply a part of the overall business approach and sort of just try to downplay those weaknesses when they're marketing their brand. So playing to your strengths is an important aspect. We do definitely want to do everything we can to offset our weaknesses, but we're also going to have weaknesses that are just a nature of the way we do, and we might be better off just accepting those. So I think that's a really important thing to know and understand. Again, when I said earlier, we're within weaknesses and strengths, we're looking at four main areas. And they're the same four areas because these are the internal aspects of the business. So we've got marketing, human resources, assets, and financial resources. Again, I'm going to give you some questions that you might want to drive into for each of these sections. When you're looking at the marketing, what complaints do you frequently hear from customers? What objections do you frequently hear from potential prospects? Is the business's distribution limited? I mean, if you're an accountant or bookkeeper, are you limiting yourself only to your local area? Are you expanding beyond your borders? When you look at your assets, you want to understand whether the business's location or physical plant, if you have one, has any weaknesses. Again, I mentioned myself, the amount of overhead that it costs to have a location at Richmond and Spadina in downtown Toronto is quite expensive, and I can see a lot of opportunity in moving to more of a distributed workforce. Lastly is whether the business's technology, equipment, or machinery is outdated. Are you when we talk with accountants and bookkeepers, do you still have infrastructure in place? Are you in your own hosted cloud environment, even if you're still doing desktop products? What kind of infrastructure are you needing to maintain? How old is that? How likely are you going to have to be to replace that in the near future? And what are the risks that you run by running that own equipment? Under human resources, we might want to identify whether the business is adequately staffed. Do we actually have enough people to manage the incoming work or the projected incoming work? Are we overstaffed? How are we going to deal with that excess capacity? Do employees actually have the skills or expertise needed to complete this? If we're moving into new areas, if we're moving from desktop to QBO, do we actually have the knowledge and expertise to be able to service our clients effectively? Under financial resources, we really want to understand whether the business suffers from any cash flow problems. A great thing about accounting and bookkeeping businesses is typically we don't have a lot of overhead compared to, say, a retail or a manufacturing business. Or look at staffing agencies who I work with a lot who basically have to fund all their resources while they're waiting to get paid from their customers and have a lot of problems with cash flow. We also want to understand whether the business's margins and their other financial indicators compared to their competitors, how they actually stack up, and whether these are weaknesses or strengths. Does the business have any excessive debt? Do they have large prepaid receivables or getting good cash flow? And would the business actually have any difficulty accessing additional capital if they actually wanted to explore and move into other areas? So I'm going to, again, open up another poll here and ask you which areas you think you have the greatest weaknesses. And I think I forgot to share the last poll, so I apologize for that. But I think I talked enough about it. So we're tracking marketing. Again, this correlates to what we saw on the last one. We've got a number of people who are telling us that marketing was a big area. A little bit of human resources, which is interesting. Wow, human resources are starting to stack up, even though so many people consider human resources to be one of their greatest strengths. A little bit under financial resources, but not too much. This is really interesting to see. Sort of about 62% who have voted. We'll give it another second or two. So really, marketing seems to be a big area. So I don't see any more votes coming in. So we're closing it at about 62% completion. And let me share those results with everybody. So not really a shocker that people's greatest weaknesses are in the marketing area. Interesting to see that we've got about, the second largest weakness is in human resources, which I can certainly understand and appreciate. You might have great strengths, you might have really amazing resources, but staffing up and finding additional resources as you grow can be a difficult thing. And so human resources is a broad area, obviously, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm going to close that out. And let's see if we can move on to our next slide and close out with a nice little quote on weaknesses. So don't let your weaknesses make you weak. The goal of weaknesses, as we said earlier, is to really shore up your weaknesses. And again, make sure that you really get that honest feedback. Again, we're not always objective about ourselves or our organizations. So make sure that we're including in the SWOT analysis feedback from external resources as well. So opportunities. So now we're moving from the internal to the external. So these are the external positive attributes that could help your business. And the opportunity section is critical to sort of the development of your company's strategies, as it sort of helps your company to identify ways to improve and grow. And constantly reviewing market opportunities helps you to take advantage of the emerging markets or changes that are taking place in the marketplace, and obviously using the company's strengths to match those. And we're going to talk more about that when we come back to the TOES analysis, or TOES analysis. I think I'm going with TOES. And these are significant advantages over the companies that fail to routinely actually take a look at what the opportunities are and miss out on the ability to gain new business and market share and obviously access to capital. So, we talked about earlier this being a snapshot in time. So it is important to come back and look at your SWOT at different points in time, because there's going to be different opportunities at different points in time. Now, similar to strengths and weaknesses, the areas that you're going to be looking at for opportunities and threats are again going to be similar. But because we're now looking at external forces rather than internal forces, we're looking at a different 4 areas or different 4 sections that we look at. So we're looking at the competitive environment, the market environment, the political environment, and the technological environment. So again, I've got some questions for you to go through if you're trying to brainstorm and trying to figure out where your strengths lie. So we look at the competitive environment. We want to understand whether our competitors have any weaknesses that your business could benefit from. Under market environment, we might want to look at whether the target market is changing in any ways that could benefit the business. Obviously, one of the big things we're seeing is the shift from boomers out, millennials in, which is an interesting area to look at when we're looking at our markets. Is there a potential niche market that the business is currently ignoring? And again, this is a really interesting area because it's an opportunity and a threat for us. We with our new company, CPA4IT, highly niche focused. And that is a real strength for that niche, but are we subjecting ourselves to risk by being vulnerable to only that one niche? And is there opportunity in exploring new niches, which I think there is, and I'll tell you more about that later. Is there something that clients and customers are asking for that the business doesn't currently provide or could add? Are there upsell opportunities? Are there any upcoming local, regional, or national events that could present opportunities for the business? Coming out networking to all these Get Connected events, the local, events in the bag that Intuit is constantly offering, going out to your board of trade, all these great things, B&I groups, all that. And what opportunities are there for geographic expansion? Again, we talked earlier about being able to open up your borders and expand beyond your local environment, which again, now with cloud and the ability to service other markets outside of your local markets, huge opportunity for many people. When we look now into the economic environment, how might the current and projected economic trends present opportunities for the business? You might be looking at housing prices and the way that they're skyrocketing here in Toronto. You might look at employment rates, consumer confidence, a whole bunch of things. And you really want to take a look at what other changes are taking place in the industry that could create opportunity. In the accounting world, we might look at the federal budget that was released and the impact that that's going to have on income splitting and how we might be able to leverage that as an opportunity to speak out and reach out and connect with potential clients or new clients. Are there any potential new sources of financing that could help our business? There's new ways. It was really interesting. There was a Kickstarter campaign for. I was an accountant. I was at an accountants council down in San Jose, and there is an accountant who is in the VIP summit at Get Connected, who is doing a Kickstarter campaign to fund the development of videos and marketing videos, which I thought was a really interesting way of finding funding for those of you who are looking to find new marketing venues and how can you fund those. Lots of new interesting ways there. Could projected changes in interest rates, tax laws, or banking regulations benefit your business? What's happening with interest rates in Canada? Is that going to be a big macro trend that you can take advantage of or could be a threat to? On the political environment, how might proposed changes to local, state, and national government either positively or potentially negatively affect the business? And I think this is really interesting. My sister-in-law, who works at a retail furniture store, has been severely impacted by some of the new trade laws and the new duties she's going to have to pay on imports that she has from Cambodia and China and all over the world. So depending upon the nature of your business, that could be a very, very big impact, or the nature of your client's business, which could be areas to drive into and see if there's areas for either opportunity or threat. On the technological side, we want to look at how we could predict technological advances that could create opportunity for the business. Obviously, in the accounting and bookkeeping world, we keep hearing over and over again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, now natural language processing, blockchain. Are these opportunities that we could leverage and be taken advantage of? So I think there's lots of areas to drive into when you're looking at your opportunities. And again, just like I did with the other areas, I want to poll everyone to see where they think their greatest opportunity is when we look at these four sections. So are your strengths in the competitive environment, are your opportunities in the competitive environment, the market environment, the political environment, or the technological environment? We got about 10% people voting, and we've got mostly are saying that their greatest opportunities in the technological environment. I definitely see in the accounting and bookkeeping world, I couldn't agree more. Even in all other areas of every business virtually, we're seeing technology playing an even more important factor. Interesting, very few people seeing the political environment as an opportunity. I definitely see that. I bet you will see that change a little bit more when we start talking about the threats. I do also see that that the competitive environment could be an opportunity. I mean, one of the things that we don't see is we haven't seen the tipping point yet where all the accountants and bookkeepers have flooded into the cloud accounting area, and I think that is a real opportunity. Some people might be framing that around the technological environment, but I think the competitive environment is also an opportunity there as well. So we're up to about 53% completion. So I'm going to close this poll, and I am going to share the results with everybody. Now, I wonder if I can switch over to my next slide while I'm sharing those results. I guess I can. That's cool. So bear with me, guys. It's been a while since I've used GoToWebinar. I've moved Markroom mostly over to Zoom. I used to use GoToWebinar, but I should digress. So again, looking at opportunities here, I got another quote for you, hopefully a tweetable moment, where success is where preparation and opportunity meet. With opportunities, this is where you invest. You invest in your opportunities because this is where you'll define your growth goals. And one of the best things that you can do is sort of start at the high level and then get more granular as you go. So starting looking at the big macro trends, then maybe the industry trends, then the market trends, and then finally, the specific industry or competitive trends that you might want to look at. So now, without further ado, we'll get to the last section somehow, some way. There we go. Oh, we got a typo. This is not opportunities. This is threats. I'm terribly sorry, everybody. So this should read threats at the top. And threats are obviously the external negative attributes that could hurt your business. When we're sort of analyzing our threats to our business, it's certainly not a fun part of the SWOT analysis, but it does help you to sort of insulate yourself from your risks as well as any external threats that might be out there. And the environment, regulations, technology, and trends are really the areas that are big factors that can threaten the viability of your and success of your business. And by actually assessing these risks and taking a look at the challenges that the company might face, the leaders of these organizations have a better chance to prepare or decide how they'll respond to that sort of strategic endpoint. And again, this can be a really important aspect when you're helping do a SWOT analysis for your clients. Oftentimes we may underestimate the risks or not have the same viewpoint as an outside provider. So as an accountant, as a bookkeeper, adding value to your clients, looking at all of these, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, having that perspective from your accountant and bookkeeper is going to be very different from what the business owner themselves might have. As I said earlier, when we look at threats, again, we're looking at the same areas that we're looking at as opportunities. We're looking at competitive environment, market environment, political environment, and technological environment. And again, I'm going to run through some questions here. So when we look at the competitive environment, are competitors planning expansion? Are they planning to launch new products or services or other changes that could take market share away from our business? Are there businesses that aren't currently direct competitors but could be in the future? We see the big four firms now entering into the small business market. They haven't historically been competitors to myself, but they certainly are becoming more and more so now. Whether they can truly compete, another question, but they are certainly trying to enter into this market. When we look at the market environment, we want to understand whether the target market is actually shrinking or expanding. Could predicted social changes negatively impact the demand for our services? As we see people moving more and more to DIY products and softwares, is that going to shrink our market share? Does the business rely too heavily on one big customer? And I know that's a big factor for a lot of accountants and bookkeepers. They might have one really large client that is, if they lose that person, that could be a big threat to them. When we start looking at the economic environment, we again want to understand how current and projected economic trends, as we said earlier, like housing prices, employment rates, consumer confidence, could negatively impact the business. So we're looking at the same areas as we looked at within the opportunities to now assess whether these are potentially threats. And I think one thing that's really interesting, and you'll see in my own SWOT analysis, is sometimes something can be both an opportunity and a threat at the same time. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. We also want to understand what predicted industry trends could hurt the business, whether there's external financial changes in external financial factors that could change, standards or cause increased costs or make it harder to raise capital, or even things like higher interest rates and borrowing costs. And if we have lines of credit and we have to deal with that, and that's a new cost, how will that impact our business? One of the other things that we're looking at, we see over and over again in the cloud environment, is as we add on more apps, the increasing costs and how we will pass those along to our clients. Is that a threat? Is that an opportunity? I'll leave that up to you to decide. And so understanding whether there's any projected increases in the cost of doing business is a factor. Again, we've got political environments, so could either local, provincial, or national governmental changes or restrictions to trade agreements negatively affect the business. And then lastly, the technology environment. How could, again, predicted technological advances negatively affect the business? So before we looked at it as from a positive perspective, now we want to understand, are there any negative ramifications? Like if you were an auditor and you see blockchain as potentially eliminating audits, is this a threat is this a threat or an opportunity? And again, let's close out our last question here around where you guys see your greatest threat. So is it in the competitive environment? Is it in the market environment? Is it in the political environment? Is it in the technological environment? We started off pretty heavy in technology. We see the competitive environment coming in pretty strong now. And technology has dropped to a bottom. I love to see that. I love to see people see technology as an opportunity, not as a threat. I think that is an indication of who we have on this call today. Because I think if we were to poll across the entire accounting industry, we might see things a little bit reversed. We might see a little bit more people perceiving technology as a threat. You know, there's articles out there all the time about whether artificial intelligence is going to take people's jobs away. I don't perceive that as a threat, but I know there's certainly people out there that do. Interestingly enough, people are seeing the competitive environment as the number one area. And again, I think I'm going to close this out and share the results with everybody. So thank you everyone for responding. So we've got 54% believe the competitive environment is their greatest threat, 31% believe the market environment, then 8% in political and 8% in technological. So really interesting to see that people don't see technology as any more of a threat than political. And this is in a time where politics are crazy. I'm not going to go into who I like or dislike, but we're definitely in new times when it comes to politics. But people don't see that as a threat, which is really interesting. The competitive environment, you know, I wonder if I share or don't share. I'm not 100% sure whether I see this as the greatest threat to me personally. You know, being niche-oriented, I see that as being a direction that the entire field is going to move toward when we talk about accounting and bookkeeping, which is going to make the competitive environment less relevant. I do fear that, generally speaking, we're seeing big four firms moving into this area. And I see that as a threat. Whether that's the biggest threat, I don't know. I think one of the things that I see as a big threat is the market environment, which we've got about 31% who share that vision with me, because markets are shifting so much. We're definitely seeing a greater move towards freelance work and the gig economy, and a whole bunch of changes going on there. We've got boomers retiring, and you know, particularly with me with an established practice, I'm sitting here going, what's the age of my clients? When are they going to retire? And do I have enough millennials entering into the area that I'm focusing in to compensate for the drop off that I'm going to see in the boomers, which is just, let's face it, a reality. So it's interesting to see. So let me hide that again and move on to our closing tweetable on threats. What happened? Okay. The optimist sees opportunity in every danger. So again, with your threats, you know, you don't have it. There's no factor. They're not within your control. So really, what your goal here is to sort of monitor your threats, because you can't, as I said earlier, influence these the way you can your weaknesses. So you'll focus on shoring up your weaknesses, but with your with your threats, really the goal here is just to monitor and to do the best you can with that. Now, finally, we are going to move into strategy. So the SWOT analysis it's great. It's a really important tool. It's a handy business guide. It helps identify where you are at a time. If you really want to get value out of this exercise, you're going to take it a step further. And we're going to use something called TOWS analysis, TOWS, which for those smart people in the room, that is SWOT spelled backwards. But it's not just a way of rearranging our SWOT analysis. It's a way to actually turn this analysis into actual strategies. So I'm going to jump over to what the TOWS analysis is. So the exercise here is to help you make connections between each quadrant of your SWOT analysis. work around the square. Now, I say square because typically SWOT analysis is done in the square, where you have strengths, then weaknesses, then opportunities below strengths, and then threats below weaknesses. So you'll work around that square, combining information from two different quadrants to create actionable strategies. So let's talk a little bit more about how you might do that. So strengths to opportunities. So you'll use your internal strengths to capitalize on external opportunities. For example, if you had a person that was really good at writing grant proposals, and there was a lot of grant money for your clients or even for yourself, then you might have a strategy to devote more focus in this area. One of the other things you'll look at is weaknesses to opportunities. So here you're trying to improve internal weaknesses by using external opportunities. Again, if we look at this grant writing example, we might say that if your firm had success in this area, or if your firm hasn't had success in this area, then that's obviously a weakness. But are there opportunities to gain access to more grant money? You could hire an expert or a consultant, and you could outsource the whole project if necessary, or maybe even send a staff member out to get training or go through seminars and webinars to become an in-house expert. Then we're also looking at strengths to threats. So here you're using internal strengths to avoid external threats. So again, here's another example. Suppose that there's an emerging technology automating what you do, like artificial intelligence. What are the organization's strengths that can help? Do you have deeper pockets simply to weather the storm? Do you plan to just ride it out until retirement? Yes, not a good strategy. Or maybe you're more adept at leveraging technology than other firms in your area. So for many other firms, these technology changes can be an opportunity to improve margins. However, if you're not on top of these changes, you could also lose market share to those competitors who are on top of the technology, who are able to use it to leverage to improve margins. So that's a good way to leverage strengths against threats. Lastly, we have weaknesses to threats. And this is sort of the most defensive position on the Taos matrix. And the strategies created here will just really be to avoid threats and sort of minimize weaknesses. You'll see it most often used when organizations are really in a bad position. For example, let's imagine a firm isn't, as efficient as the owners or stakeholders would expect. And there's a threat of losing, big clients and market share. Imagine you're at the end of your life cycle as a 65-year-old, 77-year-old accountant like my father, who's really not ready to make those changes and move into the cloud. In this case, it might make sense to merge with another organization and leverage the resources that they have, so that you ultimately keep the value of the client base, or maybe you're even just exiting. So weaknesses to threats is sort of a last-ditch effort, but still a very important part of the Taos matrix. Once you go from the Taos matrix, you really want to go to the next step, or the last step, which is implementing a roadmap. And this is just to create a list of strategies that you're prioritizing. And typically, you'll usually do your best to balance them amongst the four key elements of your organization: financial, market, operational excellence, and people. So that relates back to another concept, which is balanced scorecard, which again we studied in CMA earlier on in my career. Really useful, not the purpose of this section, but ideally you're tying your roadmap back into your balanced scorecard, and tying this back into the entire organization's goals and objectives, as well as each individual team member's goals and objectives. So we're at about 45 minutes now. I am wrapped the core area of our presentation, but we do have enough time for me to go into a little bit about a little SWOT analysis that we did ourselves. So I forgot to ask you how many people were. Let's just ask it right now. How many people were familiar with the Taos analysis before I mentioned this earlier? So it'll be interesting to see how many of you are familiar with it. No, it's a new concept. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I've used it. Okay, so some people are definitely familiar with it, but we've got the majority definitely. It's a new concept, which is great. I'm glad to see that I'm giving value. One of the hard parts for me, particularly when I'm doing a new session like we are today on SWOT analysis, I really want to make sure I'm giving value back to you guys. And I do work really hard to try and make sure that this adds value to you. And it's not always that easy to make sure that what I'm going to present is going to hit with the audience, and whether this is, new content to you, or whether it's, I'm just boring you with stuff that you all already know. But basically, we're saying 58% of you think it's a new concept to you. 32% said I've heard of it but never implemented it. And then we've only got about 11% who actually were familiar with it and implemented it. So for those 11%, I'm sorry if I bored you. I'd really do my best to try and make this content valuable, and hopefully you got some value out of it, even though you might be familiar with it. So lastly, I'm just going to close out with a very simplified version, because the long version wouldn't fit on this screen. Trust me, I tried. Around our own, my own organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So for us, one of the big strengths that we've got is large social networks. As we mentioned earlier, we've got about 70,000 followers. On Twitter for Wall CPA, I've got about another 55,000 under CPA for IT, about 6,000 on LinkedIn, another 1,000 or 2 on Facebook. So we've got fairly large social networks that we can leverage. We're blessed with long-term employees. We have some people who've been with our organization over 20 years. We've got some really unique proprietary tools and services that we provide, which help to differentiate us. And we've got what I call large receivables. So we're getting paid up front, so we don't have cash flow issues. Again, I've tried to separate these into the 4 areas that we talked about earlier. So I tried to get one example from each. On the weaknesses side, search engine optimization. Even though we do a pretty good job on marketing in general, search engine optimization is one of our weakest areas. In fact, interesting fact, guys, I have recently hired Bob Wang to help me with SEO, because he knocks it out of the park when it comes to SEO. And he's just recently launched a service there, so a little plug for him. We are exploring that, seeing how that goes. We'll see what he can do. But I'm giving him an opportunity to load that. And I apologize, I'm going to take a bit of a second here. Share my screen with the attendees. Please tell me that you guys were able to see my screen this whole time. Oh, no. No, I think it's working. Okay. Hopefully that's just an old message. I apologize, guys. So weaknesses. Internal communications is something that we struggle with. We have CRM systems, but having a distributed team, making sure that everyone knows and aware everything that everyone else is working on is really important to us, that we definitely struggle with. As I mentioned earlier, high overhead is, now I'm showing the poll. Thank you. So how do I get back to my polls? Sorry, everyone. Office overhead is another weakness I see, because we've got a $4 million building down here that capital could be better distributed in a number of different ways. We've got another weakness is that we're a premium service, so we have above average fees for our customers. I'm perceiving it as a weakness, could be perceived as a strength because great cash flow. On the opportunity side, as I mentioned earlier, I see few competitors in the cloud space. Maybe more people are moving there, but we're still at the early stage. There's still a lot of opportunity. It's been a great ride for me. Got a lot of love from the community, a lot of love from Intuit, a lot of love from the app partners, because we were one of the early adopters. One of the other big opportunities, as I said, is that we're seeing millennials embrace entrepreneurship, and they are the largest workforce right now, which is great. Bill 148, some of you might be familiar with what that is. It is here specifically in Ontario. Most people are familiar with it because it changed the minimum wage in Ontario, but it also had some specific implications for our industry around employers having to prove that if they're hiring an independent contractor, which is the area of expertise that we focus on, if they hire an independent contractor, they have to prove that the contractor is independent, and if they can't, there's subject to potentially a $50,000 fine. I've got that here as an opportunity, as a threat, and as a threat. It's an opportunity for us. It's become a big marketing channel that we've used. We've been the whole series of webinars since January of this year. It's gotten us a bunch of new business. Even though it's a threat to the entire industry, we've turned it into an opportunity. I also see artificial intelligence as a big opportunity. Again, some people might see that as a threat. I see it as a great opportunity personally. On the threat side, I do see, we talked about this earlier, the competitive market. I do see the big four entering into the small business market as a threat. I do see boomers retiring as a threat. I do also see Bill 148 as both, while we've turned it into an opportunity, it is still also a threat because many firms are actually moving away from independent contractors because they just don't know and understand that. So that's an issue. And then lastly, DIY software. So I see DIY software becoming easier than ever for people to do their own taxes. It is pulling away market share. Primarily, we're seeing it on personal tax side, which I don't particularly love anyways. But we're going to start to see it in other areas. I think as technology improves, it's going to be easier and easier for people to do corporate taxes themselves as well. So that, because I believe TurboTax now does offer do-it-yourself T2. So that's something I believe we have to be concerned about. Now, I apologize for the look and feel of this because I have an image in the background. I tried to do my best on how we actually did our TOWS analysis again. When we look at strength to opportunity, we took our large social networks against the opportunity of millennials embracing entrepreneurship, and we really want to create a whole social media campaign to target the millennials because that's where they are. They're on social media, and sort of connect with them and leverage the strengths that we have. On the strength to threat side, we want to take our strength, which is our large perceivable, to deal with our I think I messed this up. That's I guess threat to weakness. So I apologize. But that's one of the other things that we've got. Weaknesses to opportunities. We've got high office overhead to few competitors in the cloud space. So we want to move more of our clients into the cloud to enable us to have a distributed workforce. We do currently have staff around the world. The more we're able to move more of our clients into the cloud, the more we're able to handle those clients remotely and help us reduce the amount of overhead. I don't think we'll ever eliminate having an office space personally. I know there are firms out there like LiveCA who have no office space whatsoever, do everything remotely. Not necessarily for us, but as I can keep those costs down, that's something I'm definitely looking to do. Weaknesses to threat strategy. So our high fees, which is our weakness against the DIY software. So, our strategy here is to move clients towards value billing and ensure that we actually align fees with perceived value, so that the clients, might be paying a high fee, but are feeling that they're getting more than enough value for it, enough so that they get so much value that they wouldn't ever consider moving to a DIY software. Those are just a couple of examples. Clearly, I got a bit of an issue with one of them. And then lastly, how do we then take that into a roadmap? So you have your high-level long-term objective on the left-hand side, which comes out of your TOWS analysis. Then for us, it's really important to have shorter goals. Sometimes that's 1 year, sometimes that's 3 years, or 3 months, depending upon your organization. The most important thing is to have measures. Like, how are you actually going to measure this, and what are your actual targets to make sure that you've got this dialed into a specific, actionable, measurable strategy. So hopefully I was able to give you guys some value today. So the big question, the last closing poll I have for you is whether I've given you the knowledge to actually convert SWOT analysis into an actionable item. So I hope that you guys will share with me whether you actually found it useful. This is great to hear. I do also want to open it up for Q&A. Shane, I don't know if we're going to open up the audio or if we're just going to do it through the chat panel. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to share. I know I ended up going far longer than I expected. I had to track it closer to a 30-minute presentation. This is the joys of a new presentation and the fact that I am long-winded and love the sound of my own voice. So I went on a few tangents along the way as we went. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join in with me. And we've got about, we're about 38%. Maybe I'll get this poll. So most people got value out of it, but unfortunately, I am really disappointed to see that only 33%, we've got 38% now that say they need more info to be able to use the SWOT. I'd really like to hear in the Q&A what info you guys need. I apologize now for not giving you that, because my goal was really to help you guys be able to leverage this. Again, this is, I think, a SWOT analysis. The best thing you can do is go out and do one. Do one on yourself. Sit down with your team. Sit down with some friends if your team is just yourself. Sit down with some colleagues. Go through your own strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. Then try to convert them to actionable items by using your toes. And hopefully you'll see it's actually a really simple concept. It's something you should do regularly. I'm going to close that and share that poll. So again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join me. I will open it up to Q&A. I think we've got some. So you're able to ask questions in the question box. Oh, I hear you very well. Thank you. Now it is good. Emma Smallwell's business. I need a bookkeeper. So bookkeepers who are on the call, Afsana Borzana needs a bookkeeper. Just doing bookkeeping, we know you may not be the best for you, but feel free to reach out to us, cpa4it.ca. Which one should I mark? I'm not sure what you meant by that. I have a bookkeeping firm. Do we get a copy of this recording? Yes, you will. Great, thank you. So people, thanks Shannon for answering that for me. What is considered an asset within a bookkeeping business? I guess it depends on what I imagine if you are desktop and you have infrastructure that you host your desktop stuff on, servers, those would certainly be assets. If you've got a building that you run it from, that could be an asset. There's lots of things that could be considered an asset to your organization. If you have specific workflows, I would consider those an asset. If you have, there's lots of things that go into what makes an asset. Hopefully that's good. This is a great topic, and I would like to see more webinar on it in the future and get into more details. So thank you for sharing. I'd love to know what kind of details could we add? How can we really give you some meat that you guys can use? So please share the screen. I hope that is now resolved. Can you put the slide deck that you had up briefly before the poll that I think was showing what you're talking about right now with your firm SWOT? Okay, hopefully that came up, Sue. I think I did. I can roll back there. Let me just roll back there. For those of you who didn't get to see it, what else we got here? Obviously the quick poll. So sorry guys. Sorry I was the joys of presenting. I still cannot see it. Way to go, Andrew, with all your social media reach, followers. Thank you, Karen. And this is the last poll. We still have left. Okay, thanks. Start again. Do you think this will be countrywide soon? Do you think what will be countrywide, Susan? So if you can follow up with that, curious what you mean by what will be countrywide. Because I believe this webinar was offered countrywide, that's my understanding. It's great. There's a lot more to learn. Thank you for sharing. So, Oksana, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name properly, but thank you for being so active in the chat. What you gave us was the tip of the iceberg. Okay. What do you mean by that? Where can we dive deeper? What are the areas you want more? Do you want to know more questions to dive into? Because it's interesting. You Google most SWOT videos, they're like 7 minutes long. In fact, the biggest thing I was worried about is like, how do I cover this for an hour? And am I going to be able to give enough value to you guys? And the feedback is I didn't go deep enough. So that is interesting. I'd love to know how I could dive deeper into this. Maybe it's more about the strategic analysis and how you do that for your clients and the value that you can give there. That might be one area I could see. Regarding independent contractors, is what? So Bill 148, will that go nationwide? I assume that's what Susan is asking. Sort of yes, sort of no. I know in Quebec there is a bill, I forget what bill it is right now, that is being put forward that is having some similar things as Bill 148 here in Ontario. It's not quite as, let's call it restrictive. But yeah, and I can tell you now, the whole threat to the independent contractor community is a nationwide issue. It's never gone away. We've been dealing with it since, mid to late 80s with Weeby Door. It's not new. We've been specializing in this, like I say, for over 30 years now. But where there's risk, there's also opportunity, right? What is a good resource to know that I am capturing the right opportunities and threats for the business? So I think, for opportunities and threats, the best thing I think you can do is get someone to look at it who is not from your industry, an outside objective person. That's always a great way to benchmark whether you've thought of the things, because you'll be able to think of the stuff that is obvious, like artificial intelligence, changes in technology. But there might be other areas that you're not familiar with, where people can add outside input. Obviously there's a ton you can do in research on the internet. You can just Google technological changes or political changes related to trade tariffs or whatever the area might be. So the internet's obviously a great way to do your initial research. Whether there's specific sites, I don't know anything off the top of my head. I'll try to give you some later. But my personal belief is it's really talking with other people. Also understanding this is a snapshot in time. So you may very well need to come back to this in a year or 6 months. Sorry, guys. Not to voicemail. Hopefully you can hear me. Someone was trying to call me. Yes, we are now running a minute long. I'm going to try and go through the rest of these. I'll stay a little bit longer if that is okay with Shannon to try and answer these. I guess I need to start working on it and find out what I know and what I don't. Yes, that is fair. So I think if you just actually get started with it and try it, you'll find it's far easier. It might feel overwhelming. It's actually probably one of the most simple situational analysis. If we've gone into Pestle is even a little bit more complex. Again, once you start doing them, these are fairly easy situational. What is SEO again? Sorry, I'm so bad about acronyms. I don't really take the time to explain them. So SEO is search engine optimization. So this is generating traffic from search engines. Search engine optimization, generic term. When I refer to it, what I'm talking about is actually generating traffic from the actual search engines. We are generating good traffic from social media and from referral partners. We're not necessarily driving enough from the web, from the search engines. No, that's what I mean when I refer to SEO. Is there a simple language version of Bill 148? No. Well, I don't know. There's a number of videos out there that try to simplify it. I don't know if there is, and so I'm assuming that you might be a bookkeeper and dealing with all the payroll issues that came out of Bill 148, because that's a whole other issue. There's a number of people who've tried to do their perspectives on it. Again, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'll try and find one for you. Yes, absolutely. Research and connect with outside peers. Awesome. I think I got through the end of them. So thank you guys for communicating with me and sharing through the questions and answers. I apologize I didn't type the answers. Hopefully my feedback to you was valuable. So I should have run another poll. I'd love to hear from you guys. Did I add value? Was this worth taking an hour out of your day to come and listen to me rant about SWOT analysis for an hour? So give me your feedback in the chat panel, or I believe there's going to be a poll that comes out of this after. Thank you, both of you for sharing. Now I'm going to go on to, there are a few more slides at the end of this to tell you what's coming next. And we did say there would be a call to action. So the call to action is the next webinar, which, as we said earlier, is going to be with Bob Lang. I don't know what the topic is, but I can tell you, having been on panels with Bob before, whatever he's talking about, go and have a listen. You can register. There's a link here, bit.ly/2A7YS65. It's an easy one to remember, right, guys? 2A7YS65. So please do go and check out that webinar and get enrolled. I don't still have the poll, do I? God, I'm useless. Sorry, guys. Hide the poll. There we go. There's the webinar. bit.ly/2A7YS65. Please do log in and register. Thank you guys for your patience, and sorry for the pain I caused with the polls. And can't wait to see you guys. I guess the next conference is going to be, for me, the only one I'm signed up for next is Connect in San Jose. Hope to see you all there. It's a great conference. The value you get out of it pales in comparison to the cost. I know they do eventually sell out. Get your tickets today. It's a great conference. Come hang out with me in the Fairmont lobby. We'll have some drinks and we'll chat, and I'll tell you more about SWOT if you want to hear it. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. And if I don't see you, a great rest of the summer. Bye for now, everybody.